Please explain what it means to be mentally healthy and mentally unhealthy.
Okay. So the concept, the idea of mental wellness, mental health, mental illness is really fascinating to me. Because I've been trained in a particular dogma, right? I'm trained in psychology, and so I have this ability to diagnose people with mental illness. I've completely strayed away from that reality. What's really interesting to me about mental diagnoses, mental illness, is that it's based on a framework that's designed by people, right? So the DSM, which is the diagnostic manual, statistical manual for all of the mental illnesses that exist that we diagnose, is created by psychologists and psychiatrists and doctors who have decided what's normal and abnormal in society. And so if you exist outside of this box in these realms, then you're diagnosed with a particular thing. To me, I don't know, that's very culturally specific, right? Because someone who is, let's say, schizophrenic hears voices, right? And if you hear voices in the United States, you're labeled schizophrenic, you're ill, you're, and I don't know, part of me wonders if, like, when you're labeled with something, if you don't then begin to manifest that reality for yourself. That's not to say that mental illness doesn't exist and that some people really do have chemical imbalances in their brain and real distress from the things that happen, right? And that there are physiological things that happen. But when we look at just the framework of diagnosis, I just don't necessarily align with it, because that same exact hearing of voices in another culture means you're touched by spirit, right? And you've been given a gift, and then those people manifest it in a completely different way. So I think even thinking about what is mentally healthy is so specific and unique to the individual, right? Because we look at, like, what is your entire life history, right? What was the situation that you grew up with? What was your family like? What did you experience? What didn't you experience? And that all is a huge part of who you become. And so then if I, as a therapist, meet you, and most therapists don't know all of the background, because what's so interesting about talk therapy is you decide what you tell me. So I only know what you tell me, right? And then my job is to kind of read between the lines and notice your mannerisms and da 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 da, but everybody's trained differently. So I think it's unique to the individual, right? What's distressing to you might not be distressing to me. And because I work traditionally with teenagers, I'm always so hesitant to give anybody a diagnosis, because our brains aren't even fully developed until we're 25. So I don't know, if you're 17 and something is distressing you, that could completely change when you're 27, because your brain has shifted and developed and changed. And so I think to be mentally healthy means that you are well adapted in your own environment, in your own life, that you're able to pursue your goals and your dreams, that you, in my opinion, can live big in spirit and really be who you are, not who the world tells you to be. But that's very different, I think, than what the traditional psychological definition of mental wellness is. And I tend to be a little bit rebellious in my interpretation of psychology and my whole dance with it, because I'm coming from a holistic framework, right? So, like, when we think about mental wellness, we're just thinking traditionally about the mind, but there's the spirit, there's the body, there's the breath, there's all of these other things that feed your mental well-being that oftentimes we don't think about, address, even know about. Like, the breath to me is so interesting, because nobody we breathe, we take it for granted, right? Like, we're alive, we're breathing in, we're breathing out, we don't even think about it. But the breath is the most powerful thing in the entire world, because it's the only thing that we can't live without, right? We can live without water, food, shelter, people, everything we can live without for a certain time. But the minute that your breath is gone, that's it. There's no more you, And we come into the world on an inhale, and we leave the world on an exhale, and all of those breaths in between are an opportunity to explore so much space and so much of our inner knowing, and we don't do it, right? So if I live my entire life in this really short, incapacitated inhale and exhale, I could be in a state of mental dis-ease just because I haven't invited more oxygen into my body, right? And I haven't allowed the carbon dioxide to leave my body. And maybe if I just worked with a breath therapist, it would open up all this space in my brain and my body that all of a sudden my concept or my experience of my own mental interpretation of the world changes.
Well, let me hear you say mountain, mountain.